Hi everyone, welcome to a quick orientation to the CloudCard API. This is designed for developers, for software developers primarily. If you're a card office director or a user that's not super technical, then this tutorial is not going to be for you. But if you're comfortable working with RESTful web services, then you're in the right place. Okay, so what we're looking at right now is the developer's guide. And if you don't have a link to that, just reach out to us at support@onlinephotosubmission.com, and we'll get you a link to the developer's guide. And it's broken out into several different sections, the most important which authentication and the people section, and then also the photo section. So the authentication section shows you how to validate and actually log in. So if let me go back here we go, authentication. Each section is broken down like this. It shows you what the URL is that you need to hit. It shows you what method to use. It gives you an example of the request body if necessary. I mean, obviously in the case of get and delete, there won't be a request body. And then it gives you an example of the response that you can expect to get back. We try to keep this really up to date, but if you ever see that it's out of date, definitely shoot us an email at support@onlinephotosubmission.com and let us know, because we want to make sure that this is always super fresh for you guys. So this is an example of how you would log in, and I'm actually going to go through that and give you an example of that today in this orientation. But this is just an example of one particular request, and there's lots more. So the authentication request is one that we're going to go over today. We're also going to create a person, okay? And there's a lot more on this that's definitely worth reading, but that I'm not going to go into in this video because you guys can read. Just go to the docs and read them. But we're going to go through the create a person request. We're also going to get a person, we're going to update a person, and then we're going to delete that person. So let's strap in and get ready for that. But first, if you have never used Postman, I definitely recommend you do. There's a link to it in the application. It's not. It's really a great tool for investigating and interacting with a RESTful web service like the CloudCard API without adding on Java or C# or all the other complexity that you get of trying to interact with it via a program, a programming language. It's like curl, but a lot more robust. So we're going to be using that today. If you've never used it, there's a link here to Postman here on the this is the main developers doc page, developers guide page, and there's also links to these Postman collections. Okay, and we're just going to download one right now. So but you'll just click on here and select download to download the file. It'll download to your computer. And then you'll just go over to Postman and click import, and then you just drag that file right here. Now I've already imported it, and so here it is, CloudCard user import results requests, and this walks you through every step of actually making creating a user and deleting a user. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is actually to create our service account. Okay, so let me go over to CloudCard, which I'm going to log into. So app.onlinephotosubmission.com. If you don't already have an account at app.onlinephotosubmission.com, stop. You'll need that before you get started. Okay, so I'm going to go to the admin login and log in with your account credentials. All right, I am currently signed into our test organization. So the first thing we're going to do is go over here to the people view, and then we're going to click the add button so that we can add a new user. And I am going to head and put this fake email address in here. Now, it doesn't need to be a properly formatted email address, but it doesn't actually have to be an email address to get that anybody can check. So I'm just going to use this email address, service account at onlinephotosubmission.com, and I'm going to click Save here. And then I'm going to go back over to the people view, and I'm going to pull that user back up and make a few changes to it. Okay, one of the things I like to do, and I go into this in a little more detail when I talk about creating a service account. There's a whole video just on creating service accounts in our YouTube library. I recommend that you guys take a look at it, but I like to put something descriptive here so that people understand that this is maybe not a real user, or if it's, you know, a specific, you know, like a provisioning service account or whatever. Something descriptive in there, the ID number, so people have an understanding of what this account is for. Then we need to set a password. Now, every user in CloudCard does get a password automatically, but in this case, and then the password, you know, they get an authentication link sent to them, but in this case, we're not checking the email, and we want to set our password manually. So I'm just going to go ahead to this password generator and copy that password, paste that in there, and let's see. Then the other thing I need to do is we need to give this user the office role and the service role. All right, and we're going to go ahead and save that. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I want to actually log into CloudCard with these credentials before I do anything else. Before I try to work with it through the API, I want to go ahead and log in to the application. So I still had the password saved to my clipboard, so I went ahead and just pasted that there, and I'm going to go ahead and paste the email address. Great. I got logged in correctly and no problems. So, so that is done. I can go ahead and close this tab. And now I'm going to take these credentials and I'm going to go ahead and log in through the API. So let's go ahead and open up the first request from that collection, which is the authenticate request. And I'll go into the body of that request, and I'm going to paste as the username, I'm going to paste that email address that we created. And then I also want that password, so I've got it right there, and I'm going to paste that password in there. All right, and then let's just take a look at this request a little bit before we send it. So under headers, we have the content type is accept JSON, or sorry, application JSON, and the accept header is application JSON, because we're sending JSON and we're expecting to receive JSON in return. This is a post method, so it will have a body, and the URL is API, not app. Make sure you notice, I don't know how many people have made that mistake trying to send API requests to app.onlinephotosubmission.com, but this goes to api.onlinephotosubmission.com, and then the actual URL is API login. And there's our JSON body, and we're going to talk about the tests here in a minute, but let's go ahead and send this request and see what happens. All right, so we send the request and we get a 200 back. There's the status code right here, which is great. In addition, we see the body. In the body, I have the username gets returned, the user's roles get returned, and every user has a card holder, so we didn't have to select that one. But you remember we gave this user the office and service roles, and then the access token, which is something that you can use to log in via the API really anywhere, whether it's CloudCard Photo Downloader, the CSV importer, even inside of this application right here, the actual CloudCard JavaScript application. Buried in the session there is that API key, and that's how we interact. So we've sent that. Now let me talk about this test tab on the request here. Some people don't know that you can run JavaScript, ad hoc JavaScript inside of Postman, which is really nice. It gives us the ability to do tests, but also to store values for future requests. And so that's what we're doing here. We get the JSON response back, and then we check to make sure that the status code was 200, and we grab this access token right here, We grab the value of that access token. Well, first off, we make sure it's not null, and then we grab the value and we store it inside of in a sort of saved variable section. It's called in the environment as an environment variable, but not like a Linux environment variable. It's a Postman environment variable, and you can actually look at it. Well, it's behind my pretty head. There we go. Let's get rid of my head, and we can come up here to look at the environment variables. If I just click here, and I'll see there's access token, and it's got the same value that we have here. So that's been saved, and so future requests are going to be able to interact with that, and we'll see that in just a minute. So let me go back to here, and that's pretty much it for the authentication request. So let's go ahead and look at the next step. I want to go ahead and get my organization ID. Now, your organization ID is going to be different from this test organization that I'm using. Okay, and in order to do that, we're just going to do a simple GET request to the API /me. Okay, and that if any user makes that request, they get their own person object back. Okay, so we are logged in, but how does the API know that we're logged in? So if you look, oops, sorry, I'm clicking in the wrong place here. If you look under the headers here, I've got this XAuth token. Okay, so anytime you're making a request, and you'll see that in the developer's guide, you'll see lots of places where it's saying, let's see, when I want to say get a person, it's telling you, hey, you need to add this XAuth token header and see authentication for how to do that. Okay. Well, here's where we're actually putting that into practice. Okay. So here I've got an XAuth token, and remember I said we can store things in our little Postman session. So here it's got the value of access token is going to get put in there. So I could, if I wanted to, have just copied the access token that came back when I authenticated. I could have copied that, and I could paste that into here. Okay, but I wanted to show you guys kind of how you would do that a little bit programmatically. Okay, so let's go ahead and click send here. Now again, you should probably have your content type header set to application JSON, and you should probably have your accept header, again, good form, set to application JSON as well. All right, so let's go ahead and send that request. All right, so I get my own user back. It shows that I've got these roles, my activated date, all of these other things about me. But what we're most concerned with this particular step is we really want to know what my organization ID is. Okay, and that's stored down here inside the organization object, and there it is, organization ID. Okay, now conveniently, just like the access token, we have a script that's running in the background here. Okay, that says, hey, let's make sure the organization ID is present, and let's set that environment variable, my organization ID, to whatever came back in the JSON underneath the organization property, and then the ID property of that. So we see JSON data, organization ID, and it's going to store the value 92. And if I go check here, my organization ID, and there it is, 92 has been stored there. So I'm going to use that later on. We're going to see that on some of the next queries. So the next thing we want to do is we want to actually create a person. So you'll see we're going right down our list of, let me actually just close a few of these, and you can see, here we go. We've authenticated, so we're going right down our list that's in the collection. So the next thing we're going to do is create a person. Okay, so on the create a person, we're looking at our headers. Again, we need to pass the XAuth token. The content type is application JSON, and we are going to accept, well, if I can type, we are going to accept JSON as well. All right. So in addition, let's take a look at the body, because this is a post. Notice this is a post. That last one was a get, okay? And the first method was first login was actually a post, but this is a post, and here's the body, okay? And we're sending this JSON object, okay? And I'm using a Google Apps account, and so I can do this fun little thing with my email address where I just add a plus, and I can get that. But I definitely recommend creating a user for an email address you own, because we're going to actually check to make sure that the email came through. Okay, so you'll want to change this when you're actually going through this to an email address that you own. Please don't leave it at this one, because then I'll get that email. And then the identifier in this case doesn't really matter. Okay. But later on, that's going to be like your student ID or whatever your unique identifier is for matching up this photo with the actual user. It could be just the email address again. Some schools will actually use just the first part of the email address without the @ and domain name. A lot of schools will do that. All right. So remember, I was talking about the organization ID. Well, we have to tell CloudCard what organization does this user belong to, okay? And that's where we're actually storing this value, is right here in that organization ID. And then custom fields. For this test organization, we've been using, this test organization has a notes field on it, okay? And so in the notes field, we're just going to store, say, the orientation date. I don't know. You put any data in here you want. It doesn't really matter. And so we're going to go ahead and send that. Okay, and notice we get this. We get a 202. Well, the response says 202 accepted. Notice here that the status is actually 201 created. This is in flux right now, but we are moving towards. And there's a note on the developer's guide page for this specific request. We are moving from sending back 201 created to 202 accepted, because we're setting ourselves up to basically do this asynchronously, so that we've accepted the information, because saves can be, creating and updating people can actually be relatively heavyweight operations. So we want to go ahead and return back to you more quickly, so that you can get on with your processing and handle that asynchronously. All right, so anyway, this is 202 accepted, and in future this will also come back as 202 accepted. So this created our user, and actually this should have been deleted. Let me save that. There we go. Everything comes back green now. All right. So that created our user. Let's go ahead and take a look at 400 bad requests. I sent the request again. Silly me. And the reason it's a bad request is because I sent the same. I tried to resave the same person. Of course, it's saying, hey, somebody exists with that email address. So the field is email, the rejected value is this, and the message is a person with this email already exists. And here's another error, which says the username. In CloudCard, username and email are the same thing, but they are technically two different fields in the database, and so you'll get an error for excuse me, for both of those. So that person with that email already exists, and it must be unique, or with that username must be unique. So I didn't intend to send that twice, but I did, and now you get to see what happens when you try to save somebody with a duplicate email address. That you'll get an error back like this. The same thing will happen with if you're sending the same identifier, you'll also get something back that says, hey, this is not allowed. You can't have two people with the same identifier. Okay, but let's go ahead and take a look in CloudCard and make sure that that person was created. Okay, so we go look on our People tab, and we're going to scroll on down, and it should be the last person. Okay, so there he is. If you have too many people, you can just search up here with the email address or with the identifier. So you can see Tony plus API demo was created. Now use the ID of API demo. Excuse me. And there's that notes field, right? So is all specified. So that is good to go and is working. So let's take a look at we want to check our email. So let me actually check my email to make sure that this came across. And there's the email that we got when we created this user. So there you go. Okay, so that works. And while we're at it, we'll start talking through what it looks like to actually fetch a person. So I created the person. Now let's fetch them to make sure that they exist. Now this is, again, a GET request, so there's no body. Let's take a look at our headers, where we actually don't need to send a content type header because there's no content in our, but an accept header would be good. So we're sending the accept, we will accept JSON back. Again, we're specifying the XAuth token, and we're putting the value of the access token here. So we're going to go ahead and send that request, and we get a response back. And if we just kind of scroll in there, we'll see that this person has a value for their custom field, their notes field of orientation June 12th. And we can see what emails they've received, right, here, and we can also see their orientation, but also their email address, right? So there's all that information stored in there. One other thing that I'm doing here is I'm actually grabbing the person's ID, person ID, okay, and I'm storing it over here because I do want to point out one thing about this URL. These are RESTful URLs, so they're going to be, in pretty standard REST formats. So rather than using the database ID, I used the identifier field. You'll notice it's specified down here, identifier API demo. Okay, that is the school's identifier for the student. That's you guys' identifier, or whatever your organization is. You may not be a school, but as your identifier for this, which is probably going to be like student ID, employee ID, whatever, on your side. And so as opposed to using this ID field, which is the database ID, okay? So I looked this person up using that, but in order to look somebody up with a field other than the database ID, I need to tell CloudCard, what am I finding by, okay? So here I say find by identifier. And that's pulling that person up by their identifier field, okay? But in our tests here, I'm actually storing that person ID because I'm going to show you on the next, which is going to be the update. On the update, I will actually use that person ID, right? So person ID got stored over here on the last request. That's the database ID. So I can look people up, and that's actually the most efficient way to look people up. So I recommend doing that when you can, but if you can't, you can look up by the username, you can look up by the email address, or you can look up by the database ID. So let's see, let's go ahead and update this user. This is a put request, okay? It's going again to API people and with the person ID, and then let's take a look at the body here. Now, I have to apologize. If you look at the create a person body, custom fields is nested inside a custom fields object, okay, inside the JSON. And in the update, it's not. I apologize in advance for the inconsistency and the fact that you'll probably have to work around that in your code. That is my fault, and we will at some point in the future make that consistent. But at this point, just be aware that that's inconsistency in the objects. When you're updating, your object needs to look a little bit different from when you're saving an object, a person. So apologize for that in advance, but just be aware of it. Make sure it doesn't trip you up. So here's the values that we're going to update. I'm changing the email address a little bit, adding the word updated in there. Same thing with the identifier, adding the word updated there, and then I'm just changing to updated orientation. So let's go ahead and send that request. All right, I get a 202 accepted back. Remember, and this, like the save request, the update request is also in transition right now, changing from 202 OK to 200 OK to 202 accepted. Again, so that we can process the updates asynchronously. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happened when we updated our user. So let's click on him, and we can see his name is now, his email address now has the word updated in it. The ID number, I added the word updated there, and then there I changed his orientation to updated orientation. So there's a update request. Okay, and finally, to clean up after ourselves, we're going to go ahead and delete our person. All right. So notice the headers. Actually, we don't need this. Should need this content type header. Let me save that. Okay. But it's a delete method, so there's no body. We just need the XAuth token and its value stored in here. And we'll go ahead and send that request. And we get a 403 forbidden back, which is by design. Regular Office users are not allowed to delete card holders. So if you want to be able to do that, you'll need to come over here as a director level user and then give that Office level user director access and save that. This is our service account that we're editing. Okay, the account that we're logged in as. Okay, now if I try that same request, I get 204 no content back, which is a good thing. Okay, so and then if I go take a look under people, and I go scroll on down, I don't see that account. And if I search for the API demo, right, I don't see anybody in there with that ID anymore. So that's kind of takes you through the whole process of logging in, creating a user, well, getting your organization ID, creating a user, fetching that user if you need to get their ID or any other information off that user, updating the user, and then deleting the user. So that's going to kind of help you guys when it comes to provisioning of accounts, provisioning and updating and deprovisioning of accounts if you want to do that through the API. In a follow-on video, we'll talk about getting photos out of the account via the API. Hopefully this was helpful to you guys today. Please always know that you can reach out to support@onlinephotosubmission.com if you have any questions. Thanks.